Hi, good evening and a warm welcome to all. I am Ridil Mishra and on behalf of Care Ratings, welcome you to our today's webinar on seaports. And we sincerely appreciate your time in joining us for this webinar. Please be informed that we'll be having a Q&A session at the end of the panel discussion. In case of any queries, you're please requested to key in your questions. May I request Mr. Milind Gadkari, who is a Senior Director at Care Ratings, to take over the proceedings, please.
Thank you, Mridul. Sorry, I think I'm not visible. There is some issue in my webcam. A very warm welcome to all of you and to our esteemed guest panelists for the day. I have the honor of introducing our guest, Mr. T.K. Ramachandran, IAS, Chairman of VO Chidambaranar Port Trust, earlier known as Secretary Port, one of the major ports in the country. Mr. T.K. Ramachandran is a member of the Indian Administrative Service IAS, which he entered in 1991. Prior to that, he had completed Masters of Technology in Computer Science from IIT Delhi and Bachelor of Technology from IIT Kharagpur. He also has a master's degree in Public Policy from Princeton University, USA. He has served the government of Tamil Nadu in various capacities, including those of Secretary to Government Highways and Minor Ports Department, Tourism and Religious Endowments Department, Collector and District Magistrate, Deputy Commissioner, Corporation of Chennai, Managing Director, Tamil Nadu Newsprint and Papers Limited. He has also served as Secretary to the Government of Tamil Nadu in the Information Technology Department. Currently, he is also Chairman of Indian Ports Association. He has received several awards and citations from Government of India and state government, including one from the Deputy Prime Minister of India for his work in the field of land records computerization. Welcome to the webinar, sir. We thank you for taking out time for the same. Along with Mr. T.K. Ramachandran, we have from Care Rating, apart from myself, Mr. Vidhyasagar, who is an Associate Director with Care Ratings and has industry experience of over 15 years. Now, I will hand it over to Vidhyasagar to take it forward.
Thank you. Thank you, Arvind, sir. So this webinar would be scheduled in a way that we will start with our guest speaker to give a presentation on the smart technologies which government is going to adopt or how we are going to take it forward for the next 5 to 10 years. Then followed by a presentation from CARE on the facts and figures of the industry. I'll hand it over to you, sir. Ramachandran, sir. Can you please take us through your presentation?
Yeah, so I had sent you two presentations. One was a general presentation on the vision for 2030.
Yes, sir.
The other was one on smart ports. So you can tell me which to start with, or just to cover both of them in a very short, time. So how much time do we have?
Sir, we can have around a total of 40 minutes of presentation. Last 10-15 minutes would be for the question and answer session.
Okay. So if you can just put the presentation on, I'll just. Did you get both the presentations? I had sent.
I have received the maritime information.
Yeah. I just saw it was there on the screen. Just
yeah, we can see the presentation with there. You can put on full screen mode, please.
Is it visible, sir, now? Presentation?
No, it was there just a couple of minutes back. Now it has gone.
I think you have to show your, click on show your screen option, share your screen option.
Okay.
Yeah, it's there now.
Yeah, you can put on full, yeah. Now
yeah, so why I thought I would stress on this, though the topic for the day is on smart ports, is that this is a vision for the port sector which was recently approved and released by the Honorable Prime Minister during the Maritime India Summit, which took place just a couple of weeks back. And on 2nd March, the Honorable Prime Minister released this vision, which was compiled and constructed after a lot of deliberations and discussions with the maritime industry, with the ports, and with all stakeholders. And that's why I thought this might be also relevant for this evening's discussion. Next. Next.
Vidya, we can go to the next slide.
Yeah. So actually, the port sector, so to say, the Ministry of Shipping, originally what was called the Ministry of Shipping is now called the Ministry of Ports, Shipping and Waterways. So it encompasses all the sectors which are part of this so-called port sector, and or the subsectors, you can call them that. So this vision identifies about 150 initiatives across these three sectors, both ports, inland waterways and shipping. And so I will concentrate today only on the first part, because that is the subject of today's discussion. So the first part pertains to ports. The second part is about inland waterways, and now the government is seeing that there are a lot of synergies between inland waterways and ports, especially in the north, where you have perennial rivers like Brahmaputra or Ganga, and also along the coast. So coastal shipping is also an important part of this entire vision. And then finally, we are looking at shipping, where we are looking at shipbuilding and repair and enhancing India's stature as a global shipping power, and then of course on maritime research, education, etc. But coming back to ports, the first aspect that we are looking at in this vision is to create world-class ports. So the number that you see in blue tells us the kind of initiatives that are proposed over the next 10 years to ensure that we have world-class ports in India. The next is the topic of today's discussion, which is smart ports, and which aims to improve the ease of doing business, or EODB, and technology. Let's go back. Just go back. Yeah. So smart ports. That is the second point. The third point is regarding logistics cost and enabling multimodal shift, and that is important because cost is a major factor in these decisions, as all of you know, and therefore logistics cost, how it can be reduced, is a very important part. For instance, we are doing about our costs are about 12 to 14% of GDP are on logistics, whereas in the developed countries it's about 6 to 8% or 9%. So trying to reduce logistics cost is important in making us competitive. Then of course there are institutional, regulatory and legislative reforms, and finally there can be no talk in this age without having safe, sustainable and green ports, and that is what we are looking at in the last initiative. Okay, next. So among the first set of initiatives which I was talking about is the one to develop world-class ports. So the major items or initiatives which we propose in the next 10 years are: one, to have a large cluster, a JNPT Vadhavan cluster, which will have a huge capacity of about 300 million tons per annum. And then of course Paradeep and Deen Dayal are two other ports which are on the Deen Dayal is nothing but the Kandla port, which is in Gujarat, and Paradeep is of course in Orissa. So these are two other ports which are proposed to be made into mega ports. Apart from this, Ennore region, Chennai Ennore region, that is also proposed as a mega port. The second is to develop a transshipment port in South India, and so here you have a few ports which are proposed, and one of them is Tuticorin itself, because of our nearness to the international sea lines or the sea shipping lines. And the concept of a transshipment port is that it receives cargo from other ports and sends them away to other ports, different ports. And now most of our transshipment, at least in India, is happening in Colombo, and that is about 40 to 50% of the traffic handled, or more than that, in fact, handled by Colombo, is actually transshipment cargo from India which is bunched together and then sent to other ports across the world. So instead of doing, and that costs us about $50 to $70 extra, and therefore it makes sense, economic sense and commercial sense to transship ports within the country, and we save about 1,000 to 1,500 crores doing that. So we are going to develop transshipment ports in South India. The third is to, and again another question that someone asked, moving to the landlord model. That means that we will do a lot of ports, a lot of berths on the PPP mode. At present, of course, we have almost 80 berths out of the 200 odd berths. We have them operating under PPP, but the idea is to increase this number and make more and more berths into PPPs, as well as use the PPP model for many of the services that are now being delivered by the ports themselves. So from a service delivery port, we will become a landlord port, and we will operate through PPPs. And the last one is, of course, to increase the infrastructure and the draft at the major ports, so that now we have drafts of up to 14, 15, 16, and so on. But mainline vessels require much more drafts of 18 meters plus, and so we are proposing that all ports will at least have one berth with 16 meters draft. And for bulk vessels which carry coal, limestone, and so on, we have much higher drafts, or at least 14 which is 14 meters, which we now have, will go up to 18 meters. Next. So the targets which are being proposed are that we will have major ports, at least three major ports with more than 300 MTPA capacity, and we will have the 25. I think that column is missing, but we propose to go from 25 to 75%. Yeah, 75%. And then percentage of cargo handled at major ports by PPP will go from 60% to 85%. And ports with 18 meters and draft availability will go up from 5 to 9. And these are the investments. Since you're all finance people, those are the numbers you might like to look at, which tell us what are the kind of investments we are looking at over the next decade. Next. Then on the ease of doing business, there are four major pillars. One is, of course, digitization, which we are going to talk more in detail about. To make smart ports, you need the process of digitization to happen. And the second is the promotion of direct port entry and delivery, which ensures that there are no middlemen, wasting time. And then there is tariff transparency, which is hoped to be introduced through changes in law, and which is already being done, in fact. And then ensure that all your facilities that you require to provide to make the export-import process more smooth. So all the agencies, the labs, etc., are right there in the port premises to ensure that the dwell time in the port is reduced, and therefore costs are reduced. So the first thing is that first important thing in this entire chain is the digitization process, which we will see next. So when we talk of digitization, we are looking at the National Logistics Portal, the Marine Portal, by 2022. So which means that at present we have many ports individually have digital initiatives, and therefore you have, for instance, Tuticorin, almost 90% of our processes are digital. But the idea is to integrate all of them into one chain. So we have what is called the port community system, in which all the ports and all the stakeholders are part, and the exchange of messages. For instance, there might be a ship which starts from Kandla, then goes to Mumbai, goes to Mangalore or Goa, and then comes to Cochin and Tuticorin, then goes to Chennai. So there should not be a need to keep entering data relating to the ship in every port, and then the data related to the cargo, data related to the people on board, and so on. A lot of this data is actually common across ports. So the port community system tries to ensure that all this data is put at one place and then shared amongst all the stakeholders, which includes CFS operators and vessel agents and then custom agents and so on. Now this, and one step ahead, we are now going one step ahead, where we are not only looking at the ports, the major ports and the non-major ports, which are the private ports, but we are going one step ahead, and we are saying we'll also, because the ports are just one, as I said, one link in the entire logistics chain. So you start off from the supplier to the customer. So in that chain, so you have the railways, you have the roadways, and then you have the exporters and importers, and then you have the airways. So all of them, all the different modal systems, transport systems, all of them are going to be integrated into one national logistics portal, in which the ports also have a major role. And so ports and shipping sector we will handle, and it will be called the National Logistics Portal, and will be up and running by the next year. Similarly, we are looking at another 50 digital initiatives to transform Indian ports into smart ports by 2025. This looks at standardized digital architecture, RFID technology to monitor trucks, containers, and so on, which are already there, and then collaborate with private terminal operators to ensure that all solutions are digital, whether it is payment, whether it is movement tracking, whether it is ensuring that cargo is on a particular ship by a particular time, or any other interface that you have with a port. It will all be digital, and that is how we hope to transform every single port into a smart port by 2025. So these three things, one is the logistics portal, the other is the port community system, and then within the port, the Indian port, each port becoming a smart port. This is how it is. And then, of course, to become a smart port, we are implementing some ERP systems, which are called enterprise business systems, to digitalize and simplify all the processes. Of course, there's a major BPR exercise that has been undertaken, where 1800 plus processes have been reduced to 200 processes across ports, and also standardized to ensure that the EXIM trade does not have problems when they move from one port to the other. There are standardized processes, and so this also is to be inaugurated maybe in a few days. In fact, once the MCC is over, so that will be also inaugurated. That is ready, and this will come up in 6 ports across the country, which do not have this kind of a system now. That includes Chennai, Kolkata, and Mumbai, and some of the bigger ports, Kandla, Paradeep, etc. Tuticorin, for instance, already has an ERP system up and running for the past 3-4 years. Then we implement a unified ship e-registration portal for ease of vessel registration by 2021, by this year. So these are all the digital initiatives. Next. And of course, the KPI targets, just one more click, please. Yeah. So the KPI targets are, we ensure that the LPI, the Logistics Performance Index, we go up from the current 40-45 rank to become be within the first 10. And then we have a percentage of EXIM transactions to NLP, the National Logistics Platform. About 90% should be through that. Then must have digital solutions, we'll have 100%, and standardized processes and e-registration 100%. Next. And then this is about the costs. The third area was about costs. And as I said, we don't do much of our hinterland is very far off from the ports. So the fourth, the idea is to shift as far as possible the industries near the ports, so that we have port-led industrialization. This reduces the long hinterland distances that I've shown there. Similarly, high cargo dwell time can be improved by improving port productivity and cargo evacuation efficiency. Limit and high cost of doing business by reducing the cost of doing business, and technology plays a major role in that. And then modal shift. Coastal cargo happens to be very cheap in comparison to the other modes. So therefore, one of our important initiatives will be coastal shipping. Next. So these are the priority initiatives in this area of reducing cost. As I said, coastal shipping, and set up a coastal and inland cargo facilitation center, so that there is a outreach and also an integration of all the different modes of transport. and ensures that you have a single interface with the EXIM trade. Then you unlock port revenue to reduce cost of doing business, and these are different models. Of course, I won't go into them in detail, but one of the models is to improve industrialization near the ports, so that ports also get revenue and also the cost of doing business. That is the distance. For instance, in China, the distance from the port to the hinterland is on an average about 100 kilometers, because they have ensured that all the industrialization takes place near the ports. Here in India, it is 300 to 500 kilometers, and therefore the cost of doing business increases because of logistics costs going up. And then, of course, improving port productivity, which I was talking to you about, and then improving port evacuation through infrastructure upgradation, and then reducing other logistics costs. For instance, there was a recent announcement which you might have seen in the papers, that containers which we are now purchasing from China, we are going to produce containers within the country. So that was one major thing that we proposed, which is already now happening. Next. So these are some of the performance indicators which will tell us how well we are reducing our costs. So these are the costs in terms of productivity, in terms of VRC, that is a vessel related charges. So we are now almost double the international cost. So we want to take it to half or on par with the international ports. Similarly, vessel turnaround time. So now it is about 25 hours. We want to reduce it by at least 20%, as you can see, to go to less than 20 hours. Similarly, container dwell time to be reduced to about 40 hours, and average ship output, which is a meager 16,000 per day gross tonnage, we want to increase it to 30,000. Next. And these are some of the investments that we will need to do in order to achieve these targets. Next. Yeah, so these are all some of the institutional initiatives, because you cannot have any of these things happening without institutions also concomitantly being improved. And the major ports bill, which and one of the questions that was asked was landlord model. So the major ports bill, which has now become an act. This was in sometime back last month. So in March now, the Rajya Sabha has now passed this bill, and so it has become an act. And therefore it reduces the control, the regulatory power, which was now with in terms of cost, etc., which was now with a body called the TAMP, Tariff Authority for Major Ports, which now gets shifted to the ports themselves. So the tariff fixation, service provision, regulation, planning, and macro sector level planning, all this, which was very centralized earlier, will now be with the ports, and therefore there will be much more, it will be a much more flexible regime, allowing ports to set their own tariffs, etc. And so they can compete with the private ports. Similarly, there is another bill for the non-major ports, which is called the Indian Ports Bill. That is also in the process of being legislated. Next. So these are the initiatives which I just said, the Major Ports Authority, the Indian Ports Bill. And of course, the last point is very important. Even our digital initiatives are all being done through the PPP mode. And therefore, it is important that the PPP process itself is strengthened. So we are looking at the Model Concession Agreement, the MCA, being amended. So a major exercise has been taken up. So there are different models of PPP, whether they are own, maintain, transfer, or just operate and maintain. There are several models. So all models are being looked at, so that the Indian ports will become landlord ports rather than service ports. Next. And of course, the last very important area which I was talking about among the 5 sectors is to look at, because the future port should be smart, but it also needs to be green. So these are the kind of ports that we have internationally: Rotterdam, Singapore, Antwerp, where they all use LNG or cleaner fuels or even 100% electricity powered cranes and so on, lithium ion batteries, etc. But now, if you look at the Indian scenario, we use less than 10% renewable energy. We have a very small area under green belt. We have a high dependency on diesel. And so our vision is to make our ports safe, sustainable, and green. So, so there are some initiatives under that heading. Next. So these are the few large. If you look at it from a very large perspective or a macro perspective. So increase use of renewables, reduce air emissions, and improve green cover. Optimize water usage. A lot of your water gets used within ports. So optimize that, and then improve solid waste management, and then recycling of dredging material. A lot of material is dredged every year in the port, especially on the west coast, because the monsoons bring in a lot of silt, and to maintain the draft you need to dredge, so they spend hundreds of crores on that. So how can you recycle this material? So that is one of the important initiatives under the green port program. And then of course zero accident and a centralized monitoring system for the entire thing. Next. So these are the initiatives that I talked about. So make renewable energies up to 60%. In fact, we are already on the way, because by the end of this year, we would be almost 100% renewable energy, because we are doing solar, wind, rooftop, and so on in Tuticorin. And in fact, the foundation stone was laid by the Honorable Prime Minister just a month back, less than a month back. So those are the kind of initiatives to make the ports absolutely sustainable, green. And then air quality, of course, a lot of work needs to be done, because diesel, one thing that all of you might be aware is non-sulfur fuel, and then shift to shore electricity, so that there is no burning of fuel within the port limits in order to run the ships. So you just give them electricity power, they give them power from the port. Similarly, LNG bunkering, multi-clean fuels, and so on. Then optimizing the water, all this I talked about. Then sustainable dredging, and so on. Next. So these are some of the key performance indicators. So a share of renewable energy, the target is by 2030, we go to 60%. Now we are less than 10%. Similarly, green belt goes to 20%. Reduction in CO2 goes to 30%, and freshwater consumption, we at least 20% reduction, and number of accidents is 0. That's what these are the targets. Next. Yeah, I think so. That brings me to the end of this presentation.
Thank you very much for a revealing presentation, sir. A lot of developments are happening, and let's hope that everything goes in line with our schedule and plan. Thank you very much, sir. Now we'll have a short presentation from our side, which we will take you through the snapshot of the industry performance during last 1 year and during the COVID time. And post that we will go to the Q&A session. So Mridul, it's visible, PPT?
Yeah, we can see it. Vidya. You can please go ahead.
Yeah, it's there.
Yeah, good evening, everyone, once again. So this in this presentation, primarily we'll touch upon the industry performance in the recent COVID time as well, and how it is likely to perform in the next couple of years. So some update on the digital adaptation and the Sagarmala updates, followed by sector outlook and the thing discussion. So India hosts significant coastline of more than 7,500 crore, and which hosts 12 major ports and 69 non-major ports. And India's international trade, 95% comes from through maritime only. So 68% by volume, but 95% by volume. Indian Ocean hosts almost 23 countries, and most of them are emerging economies, except for the Australia. So this accounts for 50% of maritime trade, and which gives a lot of potential for the Indian economy to improve further in this aspect. And perhaps SAR also has indicated some of the key performance indicator, and the port sector has been improving over a period of decade significantly, which is very evident from the fact that vessel turnaround time has come down from 4.56 days in FY12 to 2.76. Likewise, berthing time, detention time used to be like 2.32, which has come down to almost 1 day. And even the output of ship cargo has come down, has improved significantly from 12.9 thousand tons to 21,000 tons, 22,000 tons almost. However, with all the digital developments which Sir was saying, as per some estimates, it's expected without any additional capex itself, it is likely to go anywhere between 20 to 30% further up. So the story from this, it's very clear. Like last few years has not been so good for the global trade. Somewhere because of the US-China war, and somewhere because of Indo-China tensions, and so something or the other thing were creating a problem, and then the growth has been very marginal in the last few years, and which has taken a dip during COVID time. So as you see, like 2% of growth was last year, which has come down from 6%. And it's likely to end up at minus 6.73%. Minus 6.73% as per our estimates. This primarily comes from the decline in crude, though the container and coal has picked up to a large extent because of lack of demand from the side. It's likely to be on the lower side. So this tells us like how our cargo mix is spread across major and non-major ports. It's pretty evident that petroleum and oil segment, oil and lubricant segment contributes to major 33%. So because of lack of demand from that sector alone has led to significant decline in the overall import this year, trade this year. The second largest was container, third largest was container, but even the coal was also a major contributor during the year. So what are the key issues which the ports have faced during the COVID time was one was flight of labor as well as non-availability of logistics. Significant amount of cargo were held up at the ports, and there were no takers, and some of the companies were shut down because of COVID, and they couldn't actually take their material from the port. This has led to clogging of port infrastructure, and above all, the customs clearance were not able to get through because of the non-availability of the original document physically available. This also further aggravated by the non-availability of containers in the last few months, and also some of the project execution got delayed. The commodities most affected are, as I said earlier, POL segment, followed by thermal coal, LNG, container, and cement. Though cement has seen pickup in the last few months, this has led to significant decline in the past. And commodities which have seen a sharp rebound were like iron ore, which were primarily because of the improved performance of the steel industry, and also the fertilizer, which were under the essential commodity, and it has seen a sharp rebound thanks to the good monsoon as well. So this is month-on-month performance. There was though there was a rebound in most of the ports, there was a decline in January in non-major ports because of lack of container and clogging of some of the materials. So this depicts the 11-month performance, product-wise performance. So POL, as mentioned earlier, has seen the sharp decline, minus 11% decline, whereas iron ore, fertilizer has seen the sharpest recovery, with 25% recovery in iron ore in major ports, and then 4% in non-major. And also F&RM refers to the fertilizer segment. Coal has declined, however, in the last few months it has recovered marginally, followed by container recovery as well. In total, it has been like minus 7.2% in terms of total volume for the 11-month performance as compared to the corresponding period the previous year. So these are the snapshot of some of the major ports and non-major ports. As you can see, except one or two ports, every port has seen a decline in their performance or the reduction in the throughput, anywhere between 6% to even 12-15% as well. So during COVID time, the government has stepped up in a proactive fashion and then helped. However, this also accompanied by major port authorities bill, as Sir was explaining, which is likely to benefit the industry in the long run, followed by draft Indian ports. This apart, what government has done is like allowing some of the ports under PPP model to pay it on a later stage, and ports under construction are given extended time to complete the project. And also there were no penal charge. There were waiver of a number of charges which on normal scenario they would be levied, like waiving of late fee or additional penal charges. There is no berth hire charges, so a reduction of berth hire charges, and also providing remissions on penalties as well. So Sagarmala project with Vision 2030, Sir was explaining. These are some of the updates over and above. Perhaps Sir has clearly explained what is the target and what we have achieved till now. So as Sir was mentioning, it's like more than 500 projects have been identified, which is worth more than 3.5 lakh crores, which is likely to be executed over a period of next 9 years. And this is a snapshot where you will see like how many has been completed. Almost 89 projects in the completed stage, 59 under implementation. A significant amount of projects are in a DPR preparation stage. So this is another. Apart from port development, there are significant developments are happening in the connectivity side, through rail as well as road, and where almost 1 lakh crore is likely to be invested in the next 9 years time to connect all the ports and make more efficient logistics. So this port-led industrialization, Sir has explained in detail. I think I can skip this aspect. So broadly, like what we want to say, what are the key takeaway from this presentation is, though despite of several setbacks and industry posting almost 7% decline, it is likely to rebound sharply to with 12 to 18% recovery in the coming financial year FY22. And also we expect even crude demand to come back to the normal level, which is close to like 70-75% in the current scenario. And overall port outlook looks stable for immediate future, and which is likely to move to a positive going forward once these projects, though the digital front as well as the infrastructure front gets implemented. So this is the rating dispersion of CARE rated portfolio. You can see almost 18% of the projects are AAA rated, followed by AA rated. So you will not see much projects in the sub-investment grade, which is getting reflected. Only 6% of it are in a sub-investment category, primarily because port being a huge investment, when you need a stronger parent, unless a higher rated stronger parent doesn't pitch in and then execute it, it's unlikely such a projects can even actually see the daylight. So that is one reason, that is the sponsor's strength is getting reflected in the rating, and hence most of the ratings are in investment grade. So now we'll open the floor for Q&A.
Yeah, dear participants, if you have any queries, please request it to key in your questions. Thank you.
Okay. Sir, I wanted to ask one or two questions from my side. How do you see the consolidation taking place in the industry, and how exactly it will shape up the industry? Any views on that?
Yeah, I'll talk about ports because you can see consolidation happening in the ports itself, right?
Yeah, we are
On
talking only about ports.
Yeah, so no, something might be happening in the shipping sector also, but in the ports, we are seeing a major consolidation in the private non-major ports with one key player, which is Adani, buying a lot of smaller ports near the existing both non-major ports as well as major ports. So that kind of consolidation is happening across the coast. So Gangavaram Port, so Krishna Port, then Krishnapatnam, and then now recently you must have heard about the Western Terminal in Colombo, and then there is of course Virinjam, and so on. And of course Mundra is anyway there. So these kind of acquisitions by Adani that is leading to some concentration of the port portfolio within that group. Of course, major ports are also going for expansions. Like I said, Vadavan port, which is an offshoot from Chennai, from JNPT, and Tuticorin. Of course, we are going for expansion as a transshipment hub. Therefore, the major ports are also going for expansion, but consolidation is happening perhaps more in the private sector. That's what I would say.
And what kind of impact you perceive because of that? Whether it will be a like in a way threat to your operations, or it will be complementary to your operations?
Yeah, the thing is, whichever model you take across the world, these the port growth of ports is a given, because as long as the GDP keeps growing, ports will have to grow. Number one. Number two, containerization is going to keep growing, and all goods are now shifting to containers. Therefore, anything, whether even vegetables or anything else that used to travel, go by even bulk, even cement is now being bagged and it's being sent by containers. So containerization is going to be the way forward, and all the ports have to, therefore, they have to look at this kind of change in their cargo profile. Yeah, anything else you wanted on that? I seem to have lost.
No, I'm there. Only thing, the other question, obviously, you have answered already about the
Yes, sir. Sir, one question from Mr. Sampath.
Yeah, Vidhyasagar, take it.
Sir, one question from Mr. Sampath Kumar. With global trade at crossroads coupled with Brexit, trade war, etc., what is the long-term outlook?
Can you come again? It's not very clear what you're saying. Yeah.
So he is actually referring to the global outlook, saying with the global trade at crossroads coupled with Brexit, trade war, etc., what is the long-term outlook?
No, long-term outlook, I think, is positive. I mean, even taking off from the previous question, see, on the one hand, you would think that because of coal, like you said, 3 Cs, you may mention that quite a lot in the presentation. So coal is definitely going to see declines, and crude is also perhaps long-term is going to see declines. But the thing is, like I said, containers will become the future, and even amongst India, within the ports, there's a lot of synergies. Like I said, feeder ports. So feeder ports will give their cargo to the bigger ports, and the bigger ports will then consolidate, and then they will become hubs, regional hubs, and then from there they will send their goods to other ports or even abroad. So this kind of linkages amongst the ports will also increase. So just as you have now, though you have smaller ports, airports across India, you still have the bigger ports becoming the hub ports. So that hub and spoke model is also going to work in the this sector. So a global scenario is also, I think, with globalization and with development, there is only going to be an increase. If you look at China, you know, some of the bigger ports do hundreds of millions of tons of per annum. So compared to that, we are very small. You know, we are most of our major ports, you know, are sub 100. Okay, only one or two are more than 100, like Kandla and Paradip. So we really need those mega ports, and that will happen because if you don't do that, you cannot survive in the trade. So I don't think these are all temporary. The kind of things that we are seeing are all temporary. So long term is that there is no trade has to keep going. There is no escape from that.
Okay. Sir, thanks for that. Next question is from Ms. Aditi Divakar. So, how do you see global participation in port sector? India never managed to attract global players. And going ahead, how do you see it with TAMP role dissolving?
No, it is not true that India has not seen global participation. You know, you have many of the terminals are now run by international players like DP World, you know, Dubai Ports, and then the PSA SICL, which is basically Singapore Authority. So there are a lot of, and then we have a lot of MOUs and links with Antwerp, and then you know, all these international ports. And this is one of the most globalized industries. So they just cannot be, it cannot have, but you know, a lot of influence as well as participation by global players. And therefore there is a lot of globalization. TAMP going off the radar should not be much of a problem, because till now TAMP was more a regulator as well as a tariff setter. And tariff going to the ports will help them compete with the non-major ports. That is a very important thing, because usually, you know, we had to set these tariffs based on consultation with TAMP, and sometimes that would take, apart from the time, you know, there were certain bureaucratic issues. So hopefully that will be resolved once this TAMP will continue to be there, but in a more adjudicatory role. Its role is going to be more settling disputes rather than you know, fixing tariffs.
Sir, another question from Mr. Sambat Kumar. Why with the long coastline, inland waterways is not growing as envisaged?
Yeah, so if you saw that, I had a set of presentations on that also, but I didn't touch upon that. But as you might have now seen, this there are a lot of schemes, and one of the pillars, the three pillars I was talking about was, one was shipping, one was waterways, and one was ports. So waterways is a very major you know, component of the ministry's work going to be in the next 10 years. And like I said, the Arth Ganga project or the Arth Brahmaputra project, and you know, urban transport, then RoRo, and then passenger transport using waterways in Cochin, in Goa, in Mumbai, in Kolkata, in Guwahati, and across the country, you know, all along the Gangetic plain, and of course Assam. All this is already signed. In fact, you might have seen something was inaugurated on the Brahmaputra. You know, terminals have been multimodal terminals have been inaugurated at Varanasi, and they are proposing to do that to facilitate trade between Bangladesh and India, Bhutan and India, Nepal and India, and all that. So a lot of work is being done in waterways.
Sir, this would be the last question, sir. What is the view on growth of transshipment cargo? Will multiple ports in southern India with the deep draft having transshipment capability affect viability of some of the ports as transshipment hub?
Yeah, so ultimately, so we have to decide whether we want competition or not. So instead of having one hub, it's a free market. So the mere fact that one port is declared as a transshipment hub or not does not necessarily make it the best transshipment hub. Of course, that question will always be there. There must be some distance between one port and the other. Some of these questions are being handled in the Indian Ports Bill, which is going to be tabled, so that there is a minimum distance. And now you have a lot of, for instance, if you look at Chennai, you have Chennai, Kattupalli, Ennore, and Krishnapatnam, all within a distance of about 100-150 kilometers. So they compete a lot to get the same cargo, and the hinterland also they share. So that of course makes them, it affects all of them. So I suppose the only way is to increase the traffic, increase port-led industrialization, and ensure that each of them, each of them looks at some niche area in which to specialize. So that is what will, and of course they have to be all more competitive, become more digital, ensure costs are less, and so on. So that is the only way ahead.
Thank you very much, sir. Thanks for your wonderful inputs. Mridul, we can take over.
Sure. Thank you, Vidya. Thank you, Milind, sir. And thank you, Mr. Ramachandran, for your participation and insightful views. It was really a privilege to host you for this webinar. And thank you again to all participants for taking your time out in being a part of this Care Ratings webinar. We hope the discussion was insightful and look forward to your participation in future also. In case of any queries, suggestions, and feedbacks, you are most welcome to write to us in the feedbacks, which will be coming no sooner the webinar ends. Thank you and goodbye for now.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed it a lot. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.